Hello, Retroburn here. For those of you who are new, welcome to the channel. This Grey Knights Kill Team faction focus video is split into the following sections. 1. This intro. 2. What you need for a Grey Knights Kill Team. 3. Who the Grey Knights are. 4. Grey Knights abilities. 5. Grey Knights weapons. 6. Grey Knights tactics. 7. Grey Knights strengths and weaknesses. 8. Sample Grey Knights list, which are split into 100 and 125 point lists. 9. Outro. A quick note, this how to play kill team guide about one of the more cost-effective Warhammer 40k kill teams was made in the early days of May 2021. A lot of things may have changed by then. Depending on whether Games Workshop has implemented changes to the game and or this faction, the things discussed here may or may not be applicable or viable. This also does not discuss Kill Team Commander's related Grey Knights gameplay mechanics, units, and tactics. If you ask any Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team group what would make for a cheap, cost-effective faction to start Kill Team with, a number of suggestions will crop up. Some of these would be calls for you to buy the Grey Knights Strike Squad box. While the idea certainly has merit, certainly the Grey Knights do have potent abilities. The Chamber Militants of the Ordo Malleus do have weaknesses that any first-time Grey Knights player should know. This Grey Knights guide will delve into the various strengths and shortcomings of this Warhammer 40k Kill Team faction. What you need for a Grey Knights Kill Team. 1. The Grey Knights Strike Squad box. If you're playing using the 100 point format, I'd suggest you stop here. That's it. Just that one box. Done. However, if you and your friends are using the 125 point format, you'll have points to spare. In a 5-man Grey Knights Warhammer 40k kill team, you will have space for a Grey Knight Terminator. Hence, the second box you might want to buy would be 2. The Grey Knights Terminator Squad box. Do take note though that you'll only have points to spare for a single Terminator, so if you want to save, you might want to scour eBay for a single Terminator rather than buy an entire box of them. Also, as has been mentioned, a Terminator can only be squeezed into a Grey Knights kill team if you're playing at 125 points or higher. While you can add one into a 100 point kill team, doing so would cut your force down to just 4 models, something that's not recommended in a game that involves units contesting objectives. Who the Grey Knights are.
We are the Imperium's incorruptible bastion. We are the cipher in the wall that prognosticates the doom of the tainted.
Now, we won't do a deep dive into who the Grey Knights are as this bit is pretty extensive. Instead, this section will only lightly skim this faction's background story just to explain certain Grey Knight gameplay aspects, like some of their lore-accurate tactics. The Grey Knights are a clandestine elite organization tasked with eliminating the demonic forces of chaos wherever they go. Their charge is so monumental, so critical to the survival of the Imperium, that, typically, all who have the misfortune of seeing them and their demonic quarries are put to the sword so as to leave no witnesses. In some ways, Grey Knights share the same elite status as the Adeptus Custodes, with both factions having an aspect of the Emperor in them, the former having the Emperor's gene seed, and the latter infused with a mysterious bioalchemic process co-created by the Emperor himself. While the Custodes have an almost godlike durability and combat prowess, the Grey Knights have been gifted with fearsome melee weapons and imbued with latent psychic abilities. Each of these melee juggernauts are psychers. This perk, coupled with their Space Marine durability, makes this faction one of the most unique in Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. So, do you like to play as a faction full of psychers? Do you want to play as a Cloak and Dagger Order who are as secretive in their ways as they are devastating in melee combat? Do you want to play as an elite sci-fi Inquisition clad in power armor? If you say yes to any or all of these questions, then the Grey Knights might be for you. Grey Knight's abilities.
For Titan, for the Sigillite.
As Space Marines, the Grey Knights have the standard and they shall know no fear, and transhuman physiology perks. The first lets them reroll failed nerve tests, and the second lets them ignore the first flesh wound they suffer when calculating to hit numbers. In addition to these, and as mentioned, each Grey Knight is a Psyker, which means that standard Grey Knight units can manifest one psychic power and attempt to deny one enemy psychic power in the psychic phase. All Grey Knight units know the Cybolt psychic power. Moreover, they have the perks Demon Hunters and Rites of Banishment. The former lets you reroll wound rolls for targets with the keyword demon in the fight phase, while the latter is quite a curious perk. While it does cut down the range of the Grey Knight's Cybolts to just 12 inches, their Cybolts always dish out 1d3 mortal wounds to demons. While this may sound good on paper, you have to consider that, in Kill Team, mortal wounds are applied sequentially. Phrased another way, they are not applied in bulk but one by one. That means that when you roll the injury dice for your target, you only get to roll one, regardless of the result of your 1d3 roll. Hence, this ability does nothing special against one-wound demon models. Moreover, seeing that demons currently don't have multi-wound units in Kill Team, Rites of Banishment is, quite literally, a debuff and not a perk. Expanding on their anti-demon narrative, they have the Psych Out Grenade, which, when used against Psykers or demons, dishes out a mortal wound for each hit roll of 6+. Their Terminators also have the default Terminator ability Crux Terminatus. This 5+ invulnerable save ties well with one of their weapons. We will discuss this impressive arsenal in the next section. Before we proceed to the next section, guys, I'd like you to know that I need your help. If you find my content useful and or interesting, please consider subscribing. It would substantially help this channel grow. It's free, and you can opt to drop out if you find my later videos to be not as useful to you anymore. Grey Knight's Weapons.
With sanctified blades do we ride the servants of chaos. With blessed Prometheum do we cleanse this galaxy.
At first glance, you might think that the Grey Knights are melee powerhouses. And they are. However, do note that some players miss at first what hobbles this faction: their attack 1 statistic. With such a deplorable number of swings, 2 of the melee weapons are traps. If equipped, they greatly diminish this faction's damage output. The Nemesis Force Sword and the Nemesis Force Halberd are the problematic weapons. They're just in an odd place. Need killing power? Pick the Nemesis Demon Hammer instead. Want more attacks against Horde-type kill teams? The attack 1 statistic will hurt you. Luckily, the Grey Knights have the Nemesis Falchions. Equipping a pair gives you an extra attack. Pair this loadout with the Combat Specialism, and you get a Grey Knight that can dish out 3 attacks. 1 base, plus 1 more for the Expert Fighter passive of the Combat Specialism, and a 3rd attack from the Falchion bonus. Now, I've noticed that experienced Kill Team players tend to recommend the Nemesis Falchions as the weapon of choice because of the Grey Knight's deplorable attack stat. However, I did some math hammering and concluded that the Nemesis Demon Hammer is far superior to the Falchions. If you're curious about the details, please pause this video and watch my Warhammer 40k Kill Team Grey Knights Weapons Nemesis Falchions vs Nemesis Demon Hammer video, a link to which should be appearing on the upper right corner of this video right about now. Done? Alright, except if you're facing an all Horde kill team like an Aberrant-less Gene Stealer Swarm or an Orc Horde, I suggest to never exclude a Demon Hammer wielding combat specialist from your Grey Knights kill team. It's just too good to pass up. The only scenario to exclude such a model would be if you somehow go up against an opponent that can manipulate your number of attacks. From the top of my head, I can think of one tactic that does that: the Gene Stealer Cult's Mesmerizing Gaze tactic. Also, it's quite dicey to take a 2-hammer squad, as one will be stuck with the Zealot tactic, and this specialism only lets you enjoy the +1 attack bonus if your specialist has charge in that battle round. Outside of that scenario, you can only attack with your hammer once, which is probability-wise an unappealing situation. There's also the problem of your hammer-toting operative getting flesh wounds. Having 2 flesh wounds will raise your to-hit number with the weapon to 5+. However, as I explained in my Grey Knight's weapons video, outside the shooting phase, it's quite uncommon that you'll find yourself in a situation where you'll get 2 flesh wounds on such a specialist. Everything it touches in the fight phase should die. Or that Grey Knight will die before it ever reaches a target. Everyone is averse to the idea of having a marine with a hammer wailing away at their gun line. Besides, you've got the tactic Honor the Chapter, which lets you fight again, and the perk Transhuman Physiology, which allows you to ignore the first flesh wound when calculating hit rolls. Outside of the hammer, the Falchion of course is a top pick too. It gives you 1 bonus attack, hefty armor penetration component, and D3 damage. It's also a very good pick versus a flood of low toughness and or low save units. A swarm falchion-wielding Grey Knight can split his attacks among his GEQ assailants. He will have a good chance of incapacitating one or all of his attackers. For enemies that have a good save stat, the Nemesis Force Sword may be a good option. But do know that its strength user rating will make using it versus high toughness foes a dicey situation. With toughness 5 or higher though, the falchions will do a better job than a Force Sword. Using the math hammering process I used in my Grey Knight's weapons video I mentioned before, here are the different probabilities of you wounding an enemy using these instruments of destruction. All the melee weapons deal D3 damage. The one exception, the Demon Hammer, deals flat 3 damage. Moving on to the Grey Knight's ranged weapons, we can see that, though not as fearsome as that wielded by some groups, the military arm of the Ordo Malleus do have some unparalleled weaponry. Their most basic, their equivalent of the bolt gun, the Stormbolter, is a 24-inch 401 rapid-fire 2 weapon. While not as effective against power-armored foes, the Grey Knight's standard range weapon is a nightmare for factions with a low save statistic. Their Flamer 2 is in a class all its own. I could be wrong, but if memory serves, this is the only auto-hitting weapon with an AP component that's a strength 6-1. The Incinerator is an assault D6 6-1-1 weapon. Slap this on a Terminator, deep strike it behind enemy lines, and headhunt for their leader. Volume of Fire is the theme of the Grey Knight's arsenal. Their heavy weapons are Heavy 4 and Heavy 6, with the former having an AP-1 stat. However, they suffer from a dearth of armor penetration. The Silencer might be a damaged D3 weapon and throws out a staggering 6 shots, but it doesn't offer in the way of punching through power armor. The other gun, the Psy Cannon, isn't bad at 4 shots, but as mentioned, it only has an AP-1 stat. While that amount of shots does prove lethal to GEQ units and hairy for units with invulnerable saves, you can still see right off that shooting is not the Grey Knight's forte. I've been playing with my wife and my online and RL friends, and we've observed that the Grey Knights just can't outshoot most factions. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you can't reach the gun line of your opponents, the match will soon begin to fall apart for you. As much as possible, close in. Only use a two-gunner team if the map doesn't have a lot of terrain and or you need two incinerator-wielding gunners as the other squad is chock full of chargers. However, as I will discuss in the next section, there are a couple of tactics that can improve the Grey Knight's shooting and, if used wisely, can turn the tide of battle. Grey Knight's tactics.
Burn the witch. Kill the mutant. Purge the unclean. Would it that it were that simple? Instead, we have been charged forevermore to wrest reality from the foul talons and insidious wiles of demonkind.
At the time this script was written, the Grey Knights have 12 tactics. This section is split into 3 parts. Tactics the Grey Knights share with a handful of Imperium groups, lore-friendly tactics, and tactics that synergize exceptionally well with this faction. First off, we have what I call standard tactics, tactics that can be found in a handful of other Space Marines factions. Standard tactics. Teleport Strike. Your standard Terminator tactic that allows you to teleport up to 3 Terminators anywhere on the board, but with the condition that your deep striking units be 5 inches from enemy models. This is pretty useful as Terminator gunners can carry powerful guns while still being allowed to carry their fearsome melee weapons. Equip one with an incinerator or a Psy cannon, drop them near an opponent's leader and or his gun line, and you'll still be able to attack using that model in that battle round. Twice, if you wish it so, in the psychic and shooting phases. If memory serves, under non-commander's vanilla rule sets, the Grey Knights faction is one of the 2 groups that have the distinction of being able to carry out attacks in the psychic and shooting phases in a battle round in the turn they deep strike with units that don't have an icon of flame. Honor the Chapter. Your standard fight again tactic available to a handful of kill team factions. Ceaseless Vigil. A tactic that makes opposing players think carefully about deep striking into your lines. While the Custodes Ever Vigilant lets them immediately fire upon deep strikers, Ceaseless Vigil provides a buff. It lets you add 1 to your hit rolls when targeting models that have been deep striked earlier in that round. Lore-friendly Grey Knights themed tactics. Leave no witnesses. As has been mentioned, the Grey Knights are so secretive, their charge so crucial, that they put to the sword all who see them after they've purged whatever demonic presence has wormed its way into the sector. This tactic lets you reroll wound rolls made by a single Grey Knight against an isolated model that has no other allies within 6 inches of it. Psychic Channeling. One of the must-use tactics when faced with multi-wound models that need to be taken down fast. Psychic Channeling lets you roll 3 dice instead of 2 when taking a psychic test. However, you have to drop the lowest result. This is a very good tactic given that Grey Knights have the Brotherhood of Psykers rule, a perk that I've discussed in my Kill Team Rules You Get Wrong, Brotherhood of Sorcerers and Brotherhood of Psykers rules, the link to which should be appearing on the upper right corner of this video right about now. The rule reads that you add 1 to Psychic and deny the witch tests Grey Knights take. So this means they manifest Cybolts on 4+, and Super Cybolts on 10+. With Psychic Channeling, you're upping your chances of getting Super Cybolts. In fact, I did an experiment. I rolled 3 dice 320 times and dropped the lowest result of each set of rolls. I got a 10+, with 37.5% of the rolls. That's not bad. Statistically, if you use Psychic Channeling each psychic phase, you should be getting 2 Super Cybolts on average each game. Mind you, this does not take into consideration the non-Psychic Channeling imbued psychic test rolls the other Grey Knight makes. This is quite the nightmare for Custodes and other high save and multi-wound kill team models. In fact, in the 3 games I went up against a Custodes kill team, I never lost. Mortal Wounds are just a perfect counter against Custodes players. Psychic Communion. Another tactic that increases your chances of manifesting a Cybolt and a Super Cybolt. Psychic Communion lets you add 1 to your Psychic test roll for each friendly model within 3 inches of the Grey Knight attempting to manifest a psychic power. While I'm more comfortable with using Psychic Channeling, this is more useful if you find yourself in a situation with 3 or more of your Grey Knights huddled together. For the sake of discussion, let's say you're on an objective doing battle with several enemy models and 3 Grey Knights. One attempts to manifest a Cybolt. You activate Psychic Communion. Since there are 2 friendly models within 3 inches of the caster, you now have a +2 bonus to your Psychic test. With the Brotherhood of Psycho rule, now you'll be manifesting a normal Cybolt in 2+, and a Super Cybolt in 8+. This is great if you need a better chance of taking down a pivotal enemy model. One example of this scenario would be one in which a wounded warding stave equipped Grey Knight Terminator is fighting a Plague Champion. The Terminator may have a 2+ normal save and a 4+ invulnerable save owing it to have a Nemesis warding stave, but the threat of the Plague Champion succeeding with a Nurgling infestation and bypassing your impressive save stats is too significant. Casting Psychic Communion and getting a +2 from the presence of friendly models is crucial in ensuring you have a good chance of killing that champion of Nurgle before a Nurgling burrows into your Terminator's chest cavity. In our local group, our Death Guard player always picks the secondary Steadfast. So slugfests like this, where most units converge on a single Death Guard held point, are not uncommon. Rites of Exorcism. Inflicts a mortal wound on a caster if you succeed in a Deny the Witch test. A very good tactic if the Psychic test roll your opponent came up with is very low. What with Grey Knights needing only a 4+ to manifest Cybolts, I imagine this would see heavy use in a Grey Knight mirror match. Mental Fortitude. Given how expensive this is, how small kill team boards are, and the fact that smart opponents will always be feeding you chaff anyway, I never use this. Still a good thing to know though, that Grey Knights have the ability to extend their Cybolt range to the usual 18 inches. The more useful tactics. Canticles of Warding. Given that Perils of the Warp is a thing, and that a good number of factions can inflict mortal wound on you, it's good to know that for 1 command point, you can have a 5+ save against mortal wounds. While not entirely reliable, a 33.33% chance to shrug off the possibility of a flesh-wounded or incapacitated model is still very good to have. Cybolt Ammunition. Given that Grey Knights have a dearth of AP weapons, Cybolt Ammunition is one of the 2 tactics that addresses this shortcoming. Giving a +1 buff to Storm Bolters, this tactic elevates a standard Grey Knight gun into a Strength 5, AP-1, Damage 1 weapon. It's not game-breaking, but this will prove a nightmare for GEQ squads. Psychic Onslaught. The other tactic that addresses the Grey Knight's armor penetration inadequacy. It gives the same amount of bonus, but this one brings something substantial to the table, as it buffs the silencer in the Psy Cannon. With it, the former becomes a Strength 5, AP-1, Damage D3 weapon, and the latter becomes a Strength 8, AP-2, Damage 1 gun. This is quite significant, considering that the silencer is a heavy 6 weapon. Even an AP-1 gun will pose a considerable threat for MEQs with that number of shots. The Psy Cannon's new stats are pretty self-explanatory. With a Strength of 8, you'll be wounding Marines in 2+, and the new AP-2 stat will make even Terminators break into a sweat. For the Psy Cannon, if you're willing to spend 2 CPs every time it fires, this also largely invalidates the need to have a Demolition Specialist. Heed the Prognosticers. If you're using a Terminator, and I recommend that you do, in your squad, this tactic can easily become a command point tax of sorts. There's quite the combo here. Equip your Terminator with a Nemesis warding stave. This melee weapon gives its wielder a 5+ invulnerable save versus attacks made in the fight phase. If the model already has an invulnerable save, the stave instead gives it a +1 to its invulnerable saving throws. Since all Terminators have a 5 plus invulnerable save, your Grey Knight Terminator is eligible for this feature. So, it now has a 4 plus invulnerable save against attacks made in the fight phase. If you give him the benefit of Heed the Prognosticators, he will have, owing to the +1 bonus to saving rolls this tactic gives him, a 3 plus invulnerable save against attacks made in the fight phase, and a 4 plus against all attacks made in other phases. If that's not useful, I don't know what is. Grey Knight's strengths and weaknesses.
We are few, but we are the very avatars of the Emperor himself. We are the Catholicon against the malignant light that is chaos.
The preceding sections have already touched on this faction's strengths and weaknesses. To summarize though, we're discussing them here again, albeit in a more distilled format. First off, Cybolts aren't as cracked up as some think they are. They're very dangerous, true, but owing to the injury roll phase, there will be some matches where the psychic phase won't go your way. Experienced players will just move their models to within 1 inch of obscuring terrain, and now you will have a -1 debuff to your injury roll. Anticipate and plan accordingly. Grey Knights, however, are the perfect counter to Custodes and lists that employ a lot of invulnerable saves like Storm Shield equipped Adeptus Astartes squads. With the Brotherhood of Psykers faction ability and the tactics Psychic Channeling and Psychic Communion, the militant arm of the Ordo Malleus is the most skilled Psykers in the entire game, being able to manifest Cybolts and Super Cybolts at significantly lower to manifest numbers than other Psyker teams. Due also to their squad being all Psykers, Grey Knights are one of the teams that can still attack even if they've advanced, while other teams with rapid fire, pistols, grenades, and heavy weapons will think twice about advancing. Grey Knights can still capitalize on this superior mode of movement as they can still attack targets in the psychic phase. Beginners, though, should take note that only 2 of your Grey Knights can attempt to manifest Cybolts in each psychic phase. Due to the dearth of significant AP, their shooting is subpar compared to a good number of teams. Even against a Death Guard, who can field 3 plasma guns, they will lose most of the time in a protracted shootout. Do not go there. Always plan to get your troops into melee combat. With all but one of your weapons having D3 damage, you're almost always assured you're going to kill models in the fight phase. The Nemesis Demon Hammer is the only weapon that doesn't deal D3 damage. It deals a flat 3. Your opponent should not mess with it. However, ironically, your melee loadouts are severely limited due to your Grey Knights having only 1 attack each in the fight phase. For this reason, the Combat and Zealot specialisms are must-haves when taking a list, otherwise you run the risk of severely hobbling the damage output of your squad. You can take 2 specialist gunners in your squad though, but, and I could be horribly wrong about this, the only situation in which this setup would shine is against GEQs, and even then, it would still seem dicey with some matchups. A 2 Incinerator squad versus a kill team with a lot of chargers though would be so good. Just don't play the shooting game versus factions that are very skilled at it. As Grey Knights don't have the doodads that make shooting teams the lethal powerhouses that they are, you will suffer. Besides, against low save teams, you really don't even need to bring out the heavy guns. Your Storm Bolters coupled with Cybolt ammunition will make short work of guard equivalent units. Shoot though while closing in on the enemy. As has been mentioned, do not engage in protracted firefights. One last bit about the melee versus ranged conundrum. Consider the enemy faction, for example, Orcs. Majority of non-Flash Gits Orc squads only have pistols, but do note that the faction has the Gnasher Squig tactic, which is nasty considering you only have 5 or less units in standard matches. Thinning down the enemy ranks with Incinerators and Storm Bolters before closing in may be a good idea. The Grey Knights is also a very command point hungry faction, with a handful of tactics being so crucial for their game that they can be considered as your CP tax each turn. Heed the Prognosticators, Cybolt ammunition, Psychic Onslaught, and Honor the Chapter are the tactics that come to mind. Analyze each situation carefully and plan ahead on which tactic you should be saving up for each turn. Sample Grey Knights lists.
Abaddon has burned the galaxy, has he? Brothers, we fight fire with fire. Every demon host that spills out from the Ocularis Terribus we put to the torch. Our wrath will be a fiery conflagration that will cleanse this taint.
To wrap this faction-focused video up, I'm going to present to you my Grey Knights kill teams. This section comprises two sections, namely the 100 and 125 point formats. Each format has 4 Grey Knights kill team lists, namely a list against 1. MEQs packing ranged weaponry, 2. Melee-oriented MEQs, 3. GEQs specializing in ranged combat, 4. GEQs that charge into combat. The first list is meant for MEQs packing ranged weaponry. Since Grey Knights cannot outshoot other shooty factions, this list only has one heavy ranged weapon. A heavy specialist packing a Psy Cannon will be problematic for shooty MEQs if you use a Psychic Onslaught with it during the first battle round. A 24-inch, strength 8 AP-2 weapon is no joke. The weapon is only damage 1 though, so whenever the opportunity of being able to select 2 targets of equal importance, pick the one that's not within 1 inch of the obscuring terrain. The rest are all equipped with melee weapons. The goal here is to disrupt their shooting by charging into their gun line. Don't worry about not being able to close in during the first battle round though. You still have your Storm Bolters. They're quite paltry against MEQs, but the Tactics Cybolt ammunition should improve things a bit. Just be careful your Marines won't be shot off the board before you can close in. The leader is armed with a Warding Stave. He has nothing in the way of special range weapons in terms of options, so if the enemy deep strikes and he gets charged, the Nemesis Warding Stave should offer some semblance of protection. The pivotal component of this list though is the Terminator Gunner. I made the Terminator a gunner as I usually deep strike him. Since deep striking occurs at the end of the movement phase, and since charging is part of the movement phase in Kill Team, having a ranged weapon ensures he can still dish out attacks in 2 of the phases of the first battle round. 1 in the psychic phase, and using the incinerator in the shooting phase. Now, one might argue that a Psy Cannon is better versus MEQs, but consider, versus shooty MEQs, you have absolutely no business letting your Terminator stand there and take the heat from what would probably be several heavy range weapons like plasma guns and grav cannons. You want him to charge the next turn and disrupt their shooting. During the next turn, to improve your Terminator's survivability, you will have to pay the 2 command point tax on Heed the Prognosticators, else there's a good chance your Terminator is going to go down. You need him alive as much as possible to tie down your opponent's special weapons operatives. Hence, you will have no CP left for Psychic Onslaught, the bread and butter mix for a Psy Cannon attack that wounds on rolls of 2 or more. Now, this might be confusing for newbie Kill Team players, so here goes a try at clarifying my train of thought. Without Psychic Onslaught, the Psy Cannon is just a Strength 7 AP-1 weapon. This is virtually the same class as the Incinerator, which is a Strength 6 AP-1 weapon. Strength 6 and Strength 7 weapons need the same numbers to wound a Toughness 4 MEQ. However, the Incinerator is an auto-hitting weapon with a variable number of shots, making it slightly the better choice in a scenario where you can't use the tactics Psychic Onslaught on the Psy Cannon. This strategy is also the reason why, a few minutes back, I said a heavy specialist packing a Psy Cannon will be problematic for shooty MEQs if you use a Psychic Onslaught with it during the first battle round. You won't have the command point to use that tactic on your heavy specialist in the succeeding battle rounds. However, this isn't written in stone. Be flexible. If the situation deems that the aforementioned strategy would prove suboptimal, settle for another plan of attack. I do that. There have been a handful of matches where I didn't deep strike my Terminator. About the stave, why I always equip the Terminator with a Nemesis warding stave has already been explained. For the other melee specialists, I almost always give a Nemesis Demon Hammer to the squad. As mentioned, my Warhammer 40k Kill Team Grey Knights Weapons Nemesis Falchions vs Nemesis Demon Hammer video explains why I prefer this weapon over the Falchions if going against MEQs. As discussed though, take no more than one. The other should have a pair of Nemesis Falchions. I usually make him a veteran to up his chances of charging the enemy lines in the very first battle round. Here's the Grey Knights Kill Team Elites list. The second list is meant for melee MEQs like a White Scars Adeptus Astartes squad and the Adeptus Custodes. With 3 incinerators, it's geared towards stopping charges. If they do get in, you still have your psychic attacks. Falling back with Grey Knights isn't as punishing as it is to other factions, as you can still dish out attacks via manifesting Cybolts. The other loadouts remain the same. Here's the list. The third list is the first of the 2 anti-GEQ squads in this section. This one has been designed versus squads with a lot of ranged specialists. Since this is geared for shooty GEQs, it has, like the first list, a lot of melee specialists. Once again, your goal is to not engage the enemy in protracted shootouts. In that scenario, you'll most likely lose. In light of this, the Falchions wielding veteran is back. And since shooty GEQs like to mix in hardy units, the Eldar's Wraith Guard and the Astra Militarium's Bullgryns come to mind. A Nemesis Demon Hammer equipped combat specialist is also in the squad too. If you feel your enemy won't have resilient models though, you can opt to swap in another Falchions wielding Grey Knight. The multi-attacks will prove useful if you manage to charge multiple units. The heavy specialist for this list will be equipped with a silencer. At strength 4 and damage D3, this weapon will prove calamitous for low save targets. The leader and the Terminator will still be equipped with warding staves, and the latter will have an incinerator. Here is the list. The last list for the 125-point format is very similar to the second one, but because you're up against soft targets that will most likely be swarming you, a pair of Falchions would serve you better in such a matchup. Here's the list. For the 100-point format, all the lists here are similar to the ones discussed, but because of the points limitation, some loadouts have been altered. The Terminator also doesn't make an appearance here because including one will drastically reduce your model count, something that would not benefit you in an objectives grabbing game. In all but the last list, a Falchions wielding Grey Knight replaces the Terminator. While you can still put the former in reserve, take note though that non-Terminator units can only use the tactic outflank and not teleport strike. The difference is huge, as the latter lets you drop Terminators anywhere on the board so long as they don't drop within 5 inches of enemy models, while the former lets you drop anywhere on the board so long as they don't drop within 5 inches of enemy models and so long as they drop within 1 inch of any board edge. This presents problems as, in most maps, battlefield edges are largely devoid of any cover. Still, dropping one using Outflank presents an advantage as you do have the Psychic Phase, letting you snipe an important target with a Cybolt. If the initiative is yours in that battle round, you're largely assured of 2 attacks from that model if your enemy doesn't use Decisive Shot. You can attempt to manifest a Cybolt in the Psychic Phase, and then fire with a unit Stormbolter or throw a crack grenade in the shooting phase if you so wish it. For the 100-point format, here's the anti-MEQ list. With the anti-melee MEQ list, due to the limited points, I couldn't include a Nemesis Demon Hammer. However, adding 2 Grey Knights with falchions is doable, but without a Demon Hammer, your damage output is diminished. To compensate, instead of packing 2 Incinerators for this list, I swapped out one for a Psy Cannon. With no Terminator, the idea of using Heed the Prognosticers each turn for a 5+ invulnerable save is dicey, so this leaves us with enough command points each turn to spend on Psychic Onslaught. This tactic makes a Psy Cannon a lethal component of your kill team. Here's the list. The third list, the one for shooty GEQs, is an almost exact mirror of its 125-point equivalent, so there's no need to discuss what my mindset was when I created this list. Here's the squad. The last list is for GEQs that have a lot of chargers. Against low save enemies, you really don't need to bring out the Psy Cannon, so a 2 Incinerator kill team would still be very effective against such an opposing force. I also added 2 Falchion wielding units. Here's the list. Finally, here are both the 100 and 125 point Grey Knights kill team rosters. And that's it! You've just watched my Grey Knights Kill Team Grey Knights Faction Focus video. This has been Retroburn, and if you like this Grey Knights Kill Team Grey Knights Faction Focus video, please like, share, comment, and or subscribe. Doing all 4 would be awesome. Happy gaming!